Welcome everyone to Avid's first student to industry event, Aussies in Hollywood. My name is Shauna Passell, Education Sales and Marketing Specialist for Australia and New Zealand. We're extremely excited to be kickstarting this series of events, which are designed to help motivate and encourage aspiring creators, whether you're a student, teacher, or just starting out in the industry. These events are actually designed for you, so please feel free to suggest any comments or topic points moving forward, and we're happy to help cater these events moving forward. So I'm just going to go over to the, there we go, Q&A function. So don't forget, throughout this whole webinar, you guys have the opportunity to type down your questions for Jason. So that's just at the bottom of the bar there in the Q&A section. Now, if you would also like the opportunity to ask these questions live, just type in your question, but then in brackets, maybe just say, would like the option to answer live, and we can do so and just unmute you there. Moving forward. Great, so on that note, I'm actually just going to introduce Matt Feury, who is our Senior Director of Artist Relations, and I will let him take it from here. And yeah, enjoy the webinar, everyone.
All right, thank you, Shauna, and welcome everybody for our very special presentation. One I'm hopeful that is the first of many to come on our Students to Industry program. The topic today, Aussies in Hollywood. And why not? It's always a good time to talk about Australia and Hollywood and filmmaking, especially when you have some really talented guests to come and speak on these topics. And we have, or had, not sure yet, two today. And even if you're not from Australia or you've never even been to Australia, it's okay. I think the things we're going to talk about today, the subjects of building and maintaining a career in the field of post-production, apply to everyone, no matter where you are. So I think you're going to enjoy this and get a lot out of it. Our first guest, and I say first hesitantly, is a gentleman I met back in 2012 when he was working on a film called The Great Gatsby. Mr. Jason Ballantine, a very talented editor, a very nice guy as well. Since that time we first met, he's done a lot of great movies, two very near and dear to my heart, It and It Chapter 2, and he knows I love those. He's recently completed work on the latest film in the Kingsman anthology, The King's Man. Please welcome Jason Ballantine. Hello, Jason.
Howdy, Matt. Hello, everyone.
Now, I said two guests, and we are anxiously anticipating the arrival of Andy Canny. He's not here yet. Andy also has done many a fine film, most recently and most notably The Invisible Man, which is ironic because he's kind of invisible right now. If he's able to join us, that'll be fantastic. If not, we wish him well. We'll catch up to him in a little bit. But we do have a lot to talk about. As Shauna said, the best thing about this is it's an opportunity for you to get your questions answered by Jason, who's had many years of experience in this industry and certainly has had experience making the journey from Australia to Hollywood, where he is right now. So I think the place to start, Jason, really is the start. This is not an easy field to enter into. It's any job, any role in the craft of motion picture making, television, very challenging. What is it that made you first want to be an editor, or if not an editor, because I find that a lot of people start out not necessarily wanting to be an editor. It's usually, I want to be a director, I want to be a writer, and they find that love of editing. So how did it start for you?
Well, I guess similar to what you say, Matt, I did a visual arts course, wanted to find something within the arts industry, but wasn't sure what. And they had a video branch. This is in South Australia, Adelaide. And through that course, Bachelor of Arts in Visual Arts, they had a hands-on course and it gave an opportunity of making short films. And it was kind of through the infancy of, that introduction where I guess everybody wants to be, hold the camera or be an actor. Fortunately, neither of those were my forte. And editing kind of, shone a bit of a light. In that period of time, though, I didn't really have much of a respect or knowledge, I guess, for its manipulative power. So it was more about how the shots were joined, and entered in a couple Young Filmmakers Awards, which led to work experience, which led to employment, and that's got the ball rolling.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the acting bit. That some people starting out on this path, they look at acting as a possible, place they'd want to end up. And one of the pieces of advice I've gotten from some editors over the years actually has to do with acting. I think it was Jeff Ford, editor of the Avengers, that first said to me, if you want to be a good editor, you should take an acting class, because acting is all about performance, and understanding performance is key for an editor. Have you ever taken an acting class, or what do you think of that piece of advice?
Gee, I wouldn't be an actor if it was the, or even train to, or pretend to train to, if it was the last job on earth. I think, Mum always said I had a face for radio, so I've found a comfort in being behind the camera. Yeah, I mean, I certainly can appreciate those comments. It is all about the study of facial expressions, body language, and it's all their the actors' efforts into trying to project their character that's true to story.
So one of the things that we get asked a lot from people that are thinking about this type of career is the importance of film schooling or any sort of media training. And there are arguments to be made that, well, the tools have become democratized. Anybody can get their hands on Media Composer today. It's not like it was 15, 20 years ago when you might have been starting out and it was really cost prohibitive and you had to be part of some kind of larger program to get access to the tools. Anybody can do it now. But I think that there's some really important things about this career, more so than just learning how to use the tools. So, in an environment like a film school, a TV media training school, what are the important things for students to be learning at that point in their juncture?
I think it's right, Matt, that tertiary education isn't, or any formal education training, I should say, for editing, if this is the chosen career. I don't think that's essential. On the job training is for every job. The technology is constantly changing, and so I feel that I'm always learning new things in that regard. However, I don't want to disqualify tertiary education, because the one thing that does provide an opportunity for is relationships, and I think that you do have. I find my best collaborations are those who are similar age and similar mind, and generally speaking, the students will be of a similar age. And I think that making those connections is important, because you'll grow together, learn together. And it could well be that if you were doing an editing course at AFTRS, for example, you may have access to cutting the short films of the directors and start to form relationships in that regard. So the most valuable thing that I would see in a tertiary environment is the safe house for experimenting, getting to learn what is of interest to you personally, that you would then pursue professionally. But those relationships, I think that's critical, because stepping into the professional realm, that's what every editor desperately needs, is an association, a working relationship with a director that will give you repeat performances.
So you use the term stepping into the professional realm. For you, what do you consider that first step into the professional realm? Was it a certain film project, television project that you sort of looked at and said, okay, this is it. I'm now getting to where I really wanted to be?
I think, any experience in a professional situation is valuable. Hopefully paid. That's the one thing that I think is critical, is to be mindful of not being abused, I guess. That every opportunity should be a stepping stone and feeling like you're moving forward. There may be a few sideward steps, but I wouldn't assume that everybody has too clear a goal as to what their end achievement is to be. It will change course as you go, and as we know, even just the discipline of editing, there's so many niches within, whether it's documentaries, feature films, television drama, commercials, and they're all such disparate disciplines that rarely, I don't know of too many editors who successfully straddle between those different fields. I mean, there's a few key examples, shining lights like Kirk Baxter, of course. But yeah, it's I think that in your own time of discovery, hooking into what you do want to do, or at least interested in the most, and then just pursue that avenue. And I think the best piece of advice that I can give is to work in the circles of those that can help move your career forward. And what I mean by that is I don't see too much value in being an assistant editor in live sitcom or whatever, if your heart is feature films, for example, or reality television. Like I do feel that whatever you choose, they're the circles. The people who are in those circles are the ones who are going to, give you your opportunity for you, give you that leg up. It's all, a lot of opportunity just comes from circumstantial good timing of being in the right place, the right time. And you might be an assistant editor on a particular project, and the editor's flanked with the amount of dailies and rushes, and so it's an opportunity of jumping on board and starting to help assemble. And I think that if you're in the wrong circle of contacts, then nobody is really truly going to help move you towards the direction that you want.
Well, you made a comment about something that I think is an issue that a lot of younger professionals or people just starting their journey struggle with, and that is the compensation part of it. There's a general feeling, and there's a lot of truth to it, that if you're just starting out, you're paying your dues. Like, you're going to have to take jobs you're not crazy about. You're going to be the low person, at the bottom of the ladder. But then there's also the school of thought that, work is work and you should be compensated for your work. So, how do you, as you're starting out, find that balance of like, well, I'm not going to do this for free, but at the same time, I have to understand that I'm competing with a lot of other people for a precious small number of jobs. Do you think it's critical, like every time, no, I don't care what it is, you have to get paid something? Or is there, there's certain circumstances where if you want to get into this business, you're going to have to do some gigs for free for a while?
Yeah, I don't know about doing gigs for free. But you're right, Matt. I mean, it's highly competitive, and being freelance, I'm personally the worst freelancer. Like, the anxiety between jobs. I think, I'm super excited when you get confirmation of the job and maybe sitting in the seat of day one of receiving the rushes and thinking, wow, I've got 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months of employment ahead of me. But then usually about halfway through the job, I start to think, yeah, but what's next? And so, there is obviously financial responsibilities. You do want to be paid for what you're contributing. I guess, it's all about, the snowball of collecting credits, and hopefully your reputation helps assist with people's desires to employ you. There is an element of truth in you're only as good as your last job. However, I'm not saying that, the film industry is scrupulous, but there's definitely some players in there. And so, you have to be honorable. You have to be true to yourself. If you're not enjoying an experience, then change course. I would like to finish every job that I start, but sometimes that doesn't eventuate, whether it's your own choice or somebody else's determinant. So yeah, so if you were talking at the level of cutting a mate's short film, I would at least ask them to buy me lunch. At least you're putting a value on your time. Otherwise, I think it can be abused, where they say, I'll be around your house at 11 o'clock, and 3 o'clock, you're still sitting there wondering when they're going to come. So I think that, putting some stamp of value to your input is a critical first step for protecting yourself. And then, if we are to talk at some point about the differences between Australia and America, then working in the industry, then I think Australia is a little bit more vulnerable to pay rates because it's not unionized. It's the opportunities like this and collaborations through, for example, organizations like the Australian Screen Editors, organizing face-to-face meets with other editors where you could potentially, discuss rates, or, does this sound right? Or asking a close colleague in the industry, what did you get paid on the last one or whatever, just to get some sense of pay rates. And then of course, the other end of the scale is the US, where the Motion Picture Editors Guild is, very staunchly protecting editors' hours with pension contributions and health plans and hourly rates and things like that relative to the tier level, the budget level of the film. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned something. We're certainly going to talk more about the discrepancies between working in Australia versus working in the United States, specifically Hollywood. Before I do that and follow up on another question I have, I want to remind everyone to, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat window and they'll find their way to me and then ultimately find their way to Jason. Of course, I can do this all night and keep asking questions all night. I'm happy to do that because I'm very lonely here in this lockdown world. You had said something about if you want to ultimately be a film editor, then it's not the best use of your time if you go off and you work as an assistant editor in some discipline in film and television that's just pretty far removed from that. So let's say I do want to be a feature film editor at some point. What would be the kind of starting jobs I'd be looking for to, whether it's right in line with moving up the chain in film, or if it's just certain techniques or tools that I could learn that would help me be a feature film editor, even if it's just doing, I don't know, commercials. I don't know. That's what I want to know from you is what kind of jobs do you think a young editor could take on that would really help them ultimately get to be a feature film editor?
Well, just talking of my known experience in feature films, then, it does tend to be a little hierarchical in terms of the designated roles, and pending the budget of the film, there can be a few or many roles even within the cutting room, from a cutting room PA to an apprentice to multiple levels of assistant editors, to maybe multiple editors, visual effects editors, the post-production supervisor. So there's lots of roles within post, and generally speaking, an entry-level role would be the cutting room PA, and then working your way up through the assistant editor roles. Some people choose the first assistant editor's role as their designated chosen career path. So it's not always true that an assistant editor wants to become an editor. And same with the post-production supervisor. It's another critical role within the cutting room, but quite a different role from being the editor. So yeah, Matt, I think just getting a foot in the door, generally everyone in the film industry is freelance. And so there's a whole move of employment from one job to the next. And I think that if you've pleased the people of the current ending job, then quite frequently you'll just follow that team across to the next job. And then hopefully, it's all revolving seats, and maybe the first assistant editor of the last few films gets their big break of cutting a film that they've pursued, and so their seat needs warming, and the second assistant may become the first assistant. And so, as I said, those opportunities are bred because you're born, because you're in the room, and I think that's why it's critical in any form. Just get in the room.
Yeah, that's something I've heard quite often, the importance of just being there. And, if you're there and you're on time and you're, somewhat reliable and people get to know you, eventually you're going to get the call.
You really do become a part of the furniture. It surprises me, a film will have its peaks and troughs, and we might be in preparation for a preview screening. And so we'll bring on extra hands to help get us over what's perceived a short-term bump. But the next thing 6 months later, those people are still hanging around helping out. And so, I think, again, you want to protect yourself that you're doing something that is fulfilling and that is financially suitable for your circumstances. But again, yeah, any opportunity is a good opportunity. And there's been plenty of times that I've worked on films, not necessarily in my intended role, but it's been a good experience nonetheless for maybe broadening knowledge.
But clearly, at a point in your career, the decision was made, and you actually did make the move to move over to the United States, working in Hollywood. Was that always the goal? Did you always say at some point, this is what I'm going to have to do? And why did you feel that that was the best thing for you?
I think I subconsciously always had a desire. I guess, growing up in loving films, there was always a curiosity as for who's producing it and where is it mainly anchored. And then it was through opportunities of American films shooting in Australia, or Australian films using American locations that became a few opportunities of traveling to Los Angeles and other areas that, I guess, planted the seed of enjoyment and fulfillment. And then there were, not too many Australian directors who have the reputation to afford a US studio's budget to shoot higher profile films, which, although solely Australian made, are nonetheless more of an international Hollywood label, if that's what we call it. So through those experiences, it just felt like the time to give the US a go. I had previous O1 working visas in the past and was able to renew another one, which is the legal means for getting a start in America for being able to work. You also have to be a member of the union, the Motion Picture Editors Guild, which in itself is a bit of a hurdle. But from that point, my family's outlook was to move across for maybe 3 years and give it a go, see how it goes. My wife is creatively fulfilled here in Los Angeles as well, being an interior designer, and the children now have American accents.
Oh no.
So we're the longer we stay, it's been a little over 6 years now, the more it becomes the norm. And it just feels good. I mean, this COVID period was 4 months completely not working at all. And it was the first time ever that I started to question being here, because really the whole impetus for coming to America was the pursuit of work, and also the ability of experiencing, not too much of a different culture, given Australia's influence of America, but nonetheless, new scenery. We could find some snow pretty easily. But when COVID had us not working and to stay indoors, then I must say that it was probably the first time that I started to rattle my own internal cage of what the hell am I doing here? But fortunately, working again now. So those I think being very passionate about my career, it felt natural for me to want to come here and give things a go. But that wasn't made without sacrifice. And, my wife and my parents are still around. My children aren't getting valuable time with their grandparents. And so, there are personal sacrifices made. Yeah, but ordinarily we come back once a year, but the flights aren't too frequent at the moment. And yeah, I don't think I want to sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks either. So it's kind of put a stop to our summer holidays this time. Yeah.
Well, I know it would just be supposition or just, playing pretend, but how do you imagine things would have gone if you had stayed in Australia and just kept on the path you were on as an editor? Do you think you'd be able to, had things changed in the industry and the business, that you might be able to still take on the kind of projects you were hoping to acquire going over to Hollywood, or is this just, no, it wouldn't have been the same?
I don't know, Matt. I would like to think that my career has benefited from moving here, because as I said, there's been a lot of sacrifice to facilitate it. I think that being here on the ground has given more of a presence for the people that I'm interacting with now that I do want to be here. I always had some notion, as Australians do, that that hey, don't worry about me. It's only a 12-hour flight, and I can be there tomorrow. Like if you need me, talking to the agent or whatever, if you need me in the room tomorrow, I can be there. And although I do legitimately have that opinion, as I'm sure a lot of Australians being open to travel are, I don't know, there's some perception for Americans that if you're not, 20 minutes down the road, then maybe there's a question to your commitment, perhaps. I don't know, but obviously playing into the technology side of things, which actually matters, pardon me, a part of a question you asked before that I didn't answer, then, as I'm finding now, the technology, is fantastic that you could be anywhere in the world. And I think that, there's still a little bit of a bump with getting the rushes uploaded and downloaded. That's still something to work. In fact, this current project, they're shooting in the Mojave Desert, but we're still having a daily runner physically deliver a drive to us because it was 22 hours for the first day's upload. So we thought, well, we'll have to come around to some other means for working this out. And so we are getting a physical drive each day. But yeah, Matt, Media Composer is obviously fantastic for all of those securities and even so much as the securities of what a studio requires with having remote logins for access to servers for the material and with internet speed still able to cut remotely in that sense. So it doesn't have to be local storage. Yeah.
Well, hearing you use the term rushes reminded me that there's so many conventions from the traditional filmmaking world that are still holding up today. You hear it all the time. Editors still work in reels. They going back to bins and trimming and things like that. I know you've been at this for a little while, but did you ever learn at all on any traditional film, the old analog way of doing things? Did you any experience with that?
I was fortunate enough to enter the industry just at the point of film handling phasing out. Fortunate, I say, in the sense that I had an opportunity of conforming work print as an assistant to the editor's cuts to facilitate either nightly rushes screening or sync screenings or preparing the work print for audience preview screenings. Because at that point in time, Avid was, I don't know, AVR1 or AVR3, and as standard def wasn't, of a quality that we could you think to project in a cinema. But the other fortunate aspect to that is that I'm grateful that I never did actually have to, as an editor, cut work print. I don't know how you would do that. I think that editors of that ilk must have had a supreme sense for paper cutting in their head, watching dailies and rushes and formulating how the scene should play out. Whereas my approach is abusing the technology that's before me, where I sit and watch every take and I subclip out every single moment that I like. And then I'll reorder it, the collection of those selects into script order. And then I just go through and literally choose best delivery, best angle, and start to weave that way. And I mean, that approach would be diabolical if I was handling work print. But with the speed and the efficiencies of nonlinear editing, then I can afford that opportunity. And although it's labor intensive, I do really feel that the first assembly is a pretty damn fine cut, where at least from my opinion, I've chosen what appealed to me watching dailies.
So when we were talking earlier about making that move from Australia to the United States, and you had mentioned working in Australia on, with US crews or sort of Hollywood films being done in Australia, does the concept of a film even being of a certain nationality even apply anymore because of tax breaks, because of just the technology enabling people to be all over the place. I mean, a film like Mulan that's out now, shot in New Zealand, but it's a Disney film. I mean, is there really any hard and fast definition of this is an Australian film, this is a Hollywood film, this is an Indian film? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it seems like those lines have really blurred in recent years.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Hollywood can have a negative connotation too, I think, to the style of the film as well. I don't think that it's all glitz and glamour. I guess it's just your personal preference. Some people would love Bollywood films, and some people would love summer blockbusters, and other people might prefer, more politically correct documentaries. So I still think that there's still existing boundaries, but as to who those filmmakers are and where they are in the world and how they're doing it and where they're doing it and how they're, that's completely open now. There's definitely no restrictions in that regard. In fact, the irony of going through a legal process at the moment for dual citizenship, I had to work out of the 6 years that and my family's been here, I'd actually been out of the US for 555 days, which wasn't necessarily a nice realization, because here I had brought my family across to Los Angeles at their inconvenience, and I wasn't even in Los Angeles or even America for a year and a half of the 6 years because of shooting locations for other films. And so again, I think that shows, I mean, principally it's all the studios chasing rebate, but for the as a Australian, and for the people principally, I guess, from Australia now, that benefit is that you will get films of international standing coming to town, and I think that they're great opportunities for building credits that people recognise. So I'm very grateful for the beginning of my career, particularly when Fox Studios was first opening in Sydney. There was a wonderful flood. The Australian dollar was 48 cents or whatever, so the Americans were doubling their money, and of course, Film Australia and the other state agencies were, federal agencies, government agencies were offering wonderful rebates. So it provided all of us Australian talent, crew, a real opportunity of experiencing, in the comfort of our home, an international experience. That's really critically valuable. The other thing that I think, if I had been born American and grew up in Los Angeles, I don't think my career would have the success that it has today. And I think that the opportunity of coming through the back door, so to speak, in America, has been greatly advantageous. And I think that example is purely just through the cruise of working with the people that I am now, that quite frequently the first assistant editor is somewhat older than me. And it's not that they've necessarily not wanted to edit. I just think that the ferocity, the competitiveness for getting opportunities here is pretty big. That I think, as an Australian working in a smaller pond, there are more opportunities to be had.
Okay, so I've got a two-parter for you. Before I lay that on you, I'll remind everybody to get your questions in, because mine just get more offbeat and arcane and idiosyncratic from here on out. So you want to ask the good ones instead of letting me do it, because it's just going to go way out here. Okay, here's the two-parter. And you touched on this a little bit, and I think this is going to surprise a lot of people. You had mentioned that there are people in editing that their aspiration is to be an assistant editor, and that's what they want to do. And I was kind of surprised when I first came to that realization as well. It's like, well, why would you that's almost like saying, I don't want to make it to the major leagues. I want to, just get to this point. And I don't mean to be disrespectful of their choice to be assistant editors. So the two-part question to you is, those that you have met that just want to stay at that level as assistant, first assistant, what reasons do they give you for wanting to not be a full-time lead editor? And the second thing is, I hear a lot of times from editors that what they look for in an assistant is somebody that wants to be the editor. They want somebody that wants their job. So if you would, just give me your reflections on both of those points.
Well, my first response to first assistant editors say is that that role is so specialized, so critical, so important that I never in a million years would ever think that it's second run to the editor's job. There may be first assistant editors who would like to be an editor. That's their own personal preference. But in terms of the importance of the role in the cutting room, then I did say earlier that it is a little hierarchical, but those particular two roles I think are the absolute key and heart of the cutting room. And I think that the editor's responsibility is different from the first assistant editor's responsibilities, but one can't successfully work without the other, a collaboration. And I think that for my responsibilities, the amount that I lean on the first assistant editor is huge. And I'm always so grateful for every aspect that they manage, which can cover anything from more of a scheduling management type role, putting out daily fires, communication amongst the other departments, particularly during the shoot. There's a really critical role, whether it's a digital laboratory or what, there's still some aspect of transcoding dailies, etc., management, an insurance policy for the production that nothing went missing or was forgotten or a camera card wiped. And so there's so many aspects in that regard. And then I won't list them all, but then on the creative side, it could be, as I do, lean on the assistants to help me with sound tidies for cleaning dialogues or placing effects and maybe even temp scoring. So there's creative opportunities in the cutting room as well. If they choose, as I said, it may not be everyone's choice, desire, and if it's not, that's fine. I wouldn't say that I necessarily would want to hire a first assistant editor who is setting up banana skins at the door, hoping that I break a leg and is sliding into the chair.
Yeah.
But in a simple, in the minimal form, at least have an interest in the filmmaking process and to have an opinion, to watch an edit and to say where something was disorientating or the story point isn't clear or whatever the question is, to basically have an interest in the making of the film.
So it's funny you just said have an opinion, because that's something as well I've heard a lot of times from editors, is that you can't make an edit without having an opinion about it. And they look for people that, one of the qualities they look for in an assistant, and I certainly want to ask, what you look for, is that they have opinions, that they can make an informed argument about an edit being made. So I will ask you that question. What is it that what are the characteristics, what are the skills you look for in an assistant?
Well, organization to, and communication, really. I think they're the core. To obviously be extremely comfortable with the technical aspects of shepherding and supporting what I don't bring to the cutting room. The other, having an intrinsic knowledge of Media Composer, I think, is critical, given that that's the software that 99.99% of the time is used, certainly in my experience. And then there's other aspects that an assistant editor brings to me personally, maybe not for every editor, but But boy, I love it if they're fluid with After Effects, for example, and my compositing skills are pretty average, tracking, etc. And so, I certainly will choose the elements to be composited and loosely put them, stack them on top of each other in sync. But in terms of doing neat edges and comping images into iPhones and things like that, then if they happen to have that skill, then I am ever so grateful and will often lean on them, asking if, can you help me out with this? Which I think, lends into expectations, another aspect of nonlinear film editing, that Avid facilitates the opportunity of working in 5.1 if you choose, and having a beautiful high resolution picture that can be projected easily from a quick time in a 400 seat cinema, and it looks great. Secondary color abilities, multi-channel layering, temping effects, visual effects, sound effects, music. You really can, through the tools, if time allows, produce a pretty refined looking film that fortunately the tools can get you to a presentation level that no audience member is too removed from story, that because you're gunning for a score. You really want that audience feedback, the score, to be good, because hopefully the studio will get off your back and let you wrap it up.
Okay, so I hear we have some questions coming through. I'm sure they'll pop up on my little screen in a moment. Since you brought up the screenings and you also brought up 5.1, so that's the things you're addressing are topics that come up a lot with editors, and that is to what degree do you need to create a finished quality in what's traditionally called the offline part of the editorial? And it seems in recent years, as you've illuminated, more and more that's happening, that you're mixing in surround sound, in offline. You're doing temp effects that are a little bit, you can tell they're not finished, but they're pretty close and they would fool a lot of people. So unless you're actually getting ready for a screening, why bother? Why do you have to do that? Isn't it just about making sure you tell the best story? And we're all sophisticated people. We know that that's not a finished sound effect. We know that's not finished visuals. Why bother to take it to that degree? Is it to help everyone's comfort level, feel like we're on the right track? Why do you feel that is?
Well, I guess, expectations, I'll just label it as producer expectations, but I mean, everybody wants to put their best foot forward. And I think that it's multi-layered. The editor wants to produce their best foot forward in their presentation to their director, and the director's cut, and the director wants to present their best foot forward to the producer, and the producer to the studio. And so I think that the availability of tools, the one biggest overlooked aspect is resource, the most critical resource, which is personal time, and it does take a lot of people to get a film polished to a point that a producer may expect. And I think that working on different levels of film, there has to be a lid on expectation. And I think that if you're working on a lower budget film, and I definitely have an opinion that I'll do my day job first, which is to cut picture, and then if my night job, if I'm awake during my night job, then I can get into the finessing of sound effects, and particularly temp scoring. Fortunately, some of the bigger budget films will have specified roles where I'll have a music editor, and their sole job is to receive my cuts, and their whole day is filled with auditioning temp score from other movies, which will be guided by director's preference, and that's a fantastic contributor, because I don't know how much time as a picture editor can be wasted searching through your music library, trying to find a piece of score that's suitable in terms of its timing and rhythms and emotional need, is a huge time waster. And again, if sound effects, hopefully sound team are on. And generally speaking, if I use the IT films, for example, then the editor, myself, will be by myself with the help of the assistant editors, of course, during the shoot period. But soon after the shoot's conclusion, a week or two after, you're expected to press play on a 4-hour assembly to the director. And at that point, it'd be nice if it has some tinkering of score in it. Usually the music editor isn't on the books by that time, but certainly midway through the director's cut, which again, unionized, is a 10-week requirement. So around the 5-week mark of the director's cut, we'll get a music editor on, and then they can start fleshing out and basically prepare the edit for the screening to the producers. And there may be other crews that are coming on, visual effects editors who will help composite if the first assistant and second assistants are too busy doing their day job. So yeah, Matt, does that kind of answer the question?
It answers that question and about 5 others I didn't get a chance to ask yet, which is good, because we've gotten an onslaught of questions that have come through, mostly because I don't know how to use this tool set that they've backed up. So my apologies. And I know a lot of them are, it seems a lot of them are designated that they want to actually ask you directly. So I'm not quite sure if I'm doing it right. So behind the scenes, you people behind the scenes, let me know if I'm doing it right or wrong. But there is one I want to ask you from Hannah Harmon. She's asking, how old were you when you started using Avid? Now, before you answer that, Jason, I like to think we're friends, and I'd like to still be your friend after this. So I'm not going to play that clip of you as a young Avid trainer that I have somewhere. But I'll just leave it at that and let you answer the question. How old were you when you started using Avid?
Well, Hannah, it was my first introduction to it was in 1992, which was Australia's introduction to Avid. It reached our shores then, although I think it was the late 80s that it was was born. So I was, I don't know, early 20s, but there's no age barrier to learning it, and I think that the sooner you learn it, the better. And Avid have the free application that you can download on their website and get into it. And I think it has some limitations in terms of exporting EDLs and things like that. But from what I remember of it, it's pretty much a full-blown dice opportunity of learning all the pull-down menus and icons and the functions for getting underway. So yeah, Hannah, I don't know that there's any age requirement other than sooner the better.
There you go, sooner the better. And that application that Jason is speaking about is called Media Composer First. You can download it for free and do your own, IT Chapter 3. All right, Melanie Dutton. I'm going to try and get this right and click this button, and you should be able to ask Jason your question directly. So here we go.
Hello, Melanie.
Perhaps that doesn't work the way I thought it would. Okay, that's okay, Melanie. I can ask for you. It's what I'm sort of getting paid for. Who do you brought up earlier about people being in the room with you and the importance of being in the room. How do you decide who's allowed to be in the room with you? And do you get graduate students? Do you get film students asking you, hey, can I come drop by? Can I just see what it's like to do your job? How do you decide who gets to cross those sacred doorways?
Well, I'm a big advocate for helping people, and I hope this doesn't open a new floodgate, but it surprises me how few people do ask. And so those who ask usually get a ticket to come and check it out. On the last film, we had quite a few students come in. In fact, even a couple Aussie students who were in town in Los Angeles got a tour of Warner Brothers lot and into the cutting room of Chapter 2, and we showed them around. And there are other I mean, obviously being in America, it's there are organizations here. The American Cinema Editors Guild has a program for trainees, and so they're try to find placements in the industry for a day or a week, whatever the term is, to come and experience. But I'm definitely open to it. I think it's an important opportunity, and I don't have any reservations to it. The only reservations that I've met is security of images, and so sometimes the producers are a little nervous about who's coming and what they're seeing and whatever. But there's ways around that. There's always opportunities, and I think it's important. In fact, one of the best roles I think on a film, if you're interested in feature films and trying to navigate what role within the entire process may be of interest, is a production runner, because you get time on set, and you'll also inevitably end up in every other department, from costuming to makeup to set building to post-production. And I think that's a really great role to do the Claytons, taste every department and see what one sticks.
So Jason, as anticipated, this is what always happens: is people sort of sit back and listen a lot for the first part of the session, and now as we get close to the end, it's like a ticker tape here. So I don't know if you have
I'll limit the answers.
Yeah, but I want to get to as many of these as we can, being respectful of your time. So I'll just rapid fire these. Jake Byrne is asking, in your experience, what is the most common mistake young editors make creatively? Which is a great question.
Jake, I guess maybe overcutting, feeling a need to edit. I guess, the rushes, I think, inform you as to how to cut and how frequently and where. So if you're falling into a performance and as you're watching it's sweeping you away, then let it play. Yeah, I hope that's a reasonable response, Jake.
It's pretty reasonable. You're a reasonable guy. Angus wants to know about the notion of editing can mean anything, which you got that right, Angus. Between assembling to color grading, sound mixing, and visual effects, what skills would you say are vital when starting out?
Angus, I think wanting to tell story, the best means for the most succinct means for telling that, in terms of the clarity. What's the most succinct means for telling a story? I think the greatest poison is to fall into the labor of love, in the sense of not being your own critic. If it doesn't warrant screen time, then don't give it screen time. I think an editor generally has the best standpoint of any crew member in the filmmaking process for having a liberty of being judgmental, because we didn't pay the $40,000 for the helicopter aerial, and we don't have any baggage that the actor wouldn't come out of the trailer that day and their performance is screwed. And so, I think watch the rushes, form your own opinion, see how it can best fit the story, and go for it. And the first assembly, is the toughest, because it is you by yourself interpreting. And it doesn't mean that your interpretation is the right interpretation. You may assemble something that was not even the director's intent, but when they see it, they might say, wow, that's very creative. It wasn't what I was thinking would happen, but you know what? I actually like it better than what I was planning. So I think it's important to give yourself that opportunity to do what you think is right. And again, leaning on the ease of recutting with Avid, that or any nonlinear, of course, that it's too easy to change and edit, to swap around, swap out a shot, reconstruct.
So we have a couple of related questions from Anthony and Ahmad that I want to sort of combine into one big it mega question. Matt asked about, doing a horror film, the elements like jump scares, tense sequences, you're watching them over and over and over again. And this is true of comedy with jokes, like these crucial points in the story that you have to watch as the editor, hundreds of times, they lose their impact. So how are you sure that they're working so effectively after all that time? And Anthony's part of it was just the process of maintaining the tone and mood and suspense through editing. He calls it especially scenes involving Pennywise. So I think this is sort of a big, tell us about it kind of question.
Well, I think that is the most difficult. That I think for irrespective of horror films or what is for an editor is keeping your objectivity, something that you watch over and over repeatedly to try and maintain an impression that you're watching it for the very first time. And there's some cheats of bring someone new into the cutting room and sit them down and watch their reaction. That's always a quick measure of how successful is a scene. But when you are, the greatest problem that I found with the It films was to try upset the rhythm, the expected rhythm for there's a classic. There's a classic rhythm where somebody's quietly sitting in their bedroom reading a book, and it's nighttime, and they think they hear a noise, so they put the book down and turn, and there's a slight build, a release, and then a secondary build, and the boogeyman comes out of the cupboard, and so those rhythms become very expected and anticipated. And so from an editor's standpoint, it's breaking those rhythms of expectation and, to not have the audience get in front of you, that's I think the biggest poison for most films, particularly horror films, is not emotionally carrying your audience, but they're 3 streets down the road on knowing what's going to happen. I hope that answered the question, Anthony.
I think that's a terrific answer. Christine wants to know, what's your process for choosing what jobs you accept? I'm sure is multifaceted there.
Well, Christine, I mean, that's a great question, because it for the longest time, truly the longest time, I would look back and say that I didn't really have a choice. The greatest problem that I faced professionally was the transition from assistant editing to editing, because I had built a reputation as an assistant editor where there were a few colleagues who were also had some nice credits, but I did have what I felt was a nice opportunity of being well paid as the first assistant editor on American or larger budget films. And the pay rate was literally double to triple what I would be paid editing a low budget Aussie film. And so there became a point in my career where I had to honor the creative pursuit of what I wanted to do long term. And so I was fortunate enough that Wolf Creek was my first film as an editor, and it was just fortunate that I happened to get into Sundance Film Festival, which led to opportunities of American representation and agent who could help open doors for other editing opportunities. But I would truthfully say the first 10 films that I edited were opportunities that the timing was right. And I'm not being disrespectful in saying that there probably wasn't another choice going. I was working, 52 weeks a year as an assistant editor. And then I dropped to editing 1 or 2 Australian low budget feature films a year. which were 4-week shoots and maybe 6 or 8 week post periods. And so, I was collectively employed for 12 weeks of a 52-week year. But fortunately, that transition was shouldered by my wife, who was working at the time, and also not having children. So our financial overheads were not too painful. But to go back to your question, it's only now later in the career that I start to feel that that there generally are a couple choices, and so I can start to have that luxury of what I would like to do, as opposed to of course, always grateful for every job opportunity, but there was a period where all I was being offered was mutilating people, and I promise you that is not my weekend hobby, and so it was nice to try diversify and get other genres where I think that's another problem for an editor is you do well in one genre and every producer will ask you to cut their horror film. Again, it's not a bad thing because you're being offered employment, working experiences, but yeah. Again, anyway, that's depressing. What's the next question?
Well, let's get very tactical about. We have some questions about again, sort of foot in the door kind of questions, certainly apropos for the topic we're covering today. Your advice when writing a resume or creating a reel to get hired. What is the key information that the up-and-comers, people looking for work, should highlight? What is relevant?
Don't lie. I think any industry, whether wherever it is relatively small, and the success of your collaborations are personal relationships. And so be honest. If you didn't cut something, don't write it on your resume, because the chances are the person you're handing your resume to will know who edited that thing and think an instant disqualification. I think just list what you feel, what you've done. Try breed opportunities. Cutting short films is, a wonderful creative flexing of your muscles where it's getting you involved. You can still be, your day job might be an assistant editor, earning, making ends meet, and of weekends your creative journey is cutting short films with friends. And does Tropfest still run? I don't know, but Tropfest was a great opportunity for cutting short films where the winner would win $1 million for that crew to go off and make their first feature film. And so again, if you're a part of a creative team and you've done well for the director of the short film, then hopefully they invite you to be the editor of their feature film. And so the resume is only a piece of paper, and most editors will receive multiple pieces of paper. And so I think putting a face to the piece of paper, asking, I think, generally speaking, I've never met an unfriendly editor, fortunately. I think most are open to having coffees, having a chat, sharing opportunities. And I think putting your face in front of people is probably the best means for future employment.
So Jason, if you can entertain just a couple more. Certainly there's a few congratulations and good on you kind of messages.
Nice, thank you.
Crispy says hello, and just wondering how much contact you have with fellow expats in LA. Is there any sense of community? That's a great question. With those other Aussies in LA.
There are a couple of organizations that help harbor the Aussies getting together. Australians in Film is one. There's a couple Facebook groups too. The irony, I will plead that I am not a member, unfortunately. The silly thing is when you're busy, too busy to socialize, as silly as that sounds, but that's the honest truth, that my mum sees more movies than I do when I'm working. So yeah, I mean the one key thing behind socializing is that for all of us in our industry, we don't have the advantage of collecting, the Sydney Morning Herald and reading Saturday's employment section to get a lead on a job. And so I think that not everyone's comfortable with what's the word, Matt?
There's so many.
There's so many words.
It's too many.
Self-promotion and oh my God, networking. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. But the truth of the matter is that you do have to network to some degree. I mean, you hope you're mingling with like-minded, nice people, and again, the ASE is a great opportunity and free for students as well. I'll give them a plug. Join, and outside of COVID restrictions, they meet frequently, whether it's Q&A for film screenings or meeting at the pub. Every state tries to organise some face-to-face opportunity for students, assistant editors, and editors to all get together, and it's through that sharing of information. And plenty of jobs have come from friends who are offered something and employed, and so they say, hey, why don't you give Jason a call, or me saying, Crispy, what's going on? And
everybody
he goes,
knows Crispy.
I think that's out there, and I think that's out there, and then he's gratefully given me a lead to follow up. So yeah, that's really critical. We might sit in a dark room from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. But yeah, the socializing aspect is important for realizing that you're not the only one in the sinking boat, as it can feel sometimes. But for that critical information sharing of what jobs are going and what rate should I be asking for.
There's probably more questions than we can really get to in this sort of overtime period. Again, I know
I'll
you
make
just
them
pointed
short.
out. What's that?
Let's go for it, and I'll make them short answers.
Okay. All right. All right. So first, mentoring. We really need to touch on that. The importance of mentoring in this business. So is there anybody you recollect was important in mentoring you in your career? And how do you function as a mentor for up and comers, whether it's your assistant or anybody else? What's the best thing that you can do for them, or what could they hope to expect from you as a mentor?
I think just an inclusiveness. It's difficult when you're working in separate rooms, and this technology has somewhat created a separation in the roles, particularly between assistant editor and an editor. However, when I look back on my assistant editing career, I am surprised how much I learnt by osmosis, just purely being in the room, hearing conversations, learning the etiquette of a cutting room. Just the simplicities of how to behave when a producer walks into the room, or helping the editor care for their director and care for the project. It's there's so much to witness, and I think from a mentoring point of view, I hope that the on-the-job training is the best form of mentoring. That it isn't a prescribed short period of time where it's only a come visit for a day or a week, but that you're actually an integral part of the machination of the cutting room. That every job is offering a new experience, and even outside of the changing technology, personalities have a huge play. The director can can dictate how a lot of cutting rooms are, and so that's another learning experience.
So you had talked about, this whole COVID period, not being able, thinking that the whole reason you came over to the United States was to work steadily, and then you're not working. Is your plan to keep on working in the United States, or once hopefully soon, things get back to somewhat normal. Do you see yourself working, going back and forth between Australia and the United States, or anywhere else for that matter?
Well, I mean, I'd dearly love to be able to come home and work on a film. That's for sure. I mean, the one hurdle that I personally face is my children. Although I would love to think that I could be a flexible man of the world, and as the jobs have required, shooting periods in Toronto and London and whatever, there's a parental responsibility to being a half decent dad. And although, it could be said that my creative pursuit is obviously fulfilling one financial requirement for the family, I can't have the kids. It would be unreasonable, especially my eldest, who is getting to the end of his primary school now, elementary school, that I can't be flipping schools on him all the time. And I think that the greatest lesson I've learned, which isn't a professional consideration but a personal, is I don't really want to be away from my family. And I think the one wonderful benefit that we have in post-production is that generally speaking, we can edit from not necessarily home, but our hometown, and that we don't have to be at the beck and call of traveling to locations. I mean, there's a benefit for being present on set sometimes, but it's not essential.
All right. So, and you make a great point. We could do a whole other topic on just the demands that this business puts on your personal situation and the sacrifices you have to make at home to do this job at the professional level. But that's a topic for another day. Tim is asking, is there anything you learned during your time as an assistant that you still reflect upon and bring with you each day to your job?
Organization, Tim. I think that that everything that I was taught as an assistant editor and was requested by the editors that I was serving, that it just bled into good work practice. That is, the organizational aspect is something that I often lean upon and enjoy. I have to be organized to creatively get my head around what's going on.
So Scott asked a question about, well, first he wants to congratulate you on all your success. I'm sure we all do. But when you're not editing, you're just relaxing and watching a movie. And this is a question I ask editors all the time. Can you just relax and enjoy the movie, or do you find yourself judging the edits or thinking about how you might have edited a scene as you're watching it?
Not at all, Scott. Like I am as much an audience member as Mum is. If for whatever reason the film doesn't hold my attention, then I might get into enjoying, the background extras, actions, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if the film's doing its job, and I say film, but I must say I watch more episodical television. I think that there's greater series, TV, drama available to us now on streaming services than my opportunities of getting to the movies. And so rarely does my professional aspect interfere with my audience enjoyment.
So last official question, Justin, speaking of, you said, background extras, I remember watching you in the Star Wars Episode 3 production diaries talking about digital dailies. I remember that too. I love that clip. As a former Aussie Sydney sider, it must have been an incredible time to have that kind of production in our backyard. So reflections on that project and having it there in Australia.
Yeah, Justin, it was, I mean, that film is a classic example of what I was talking about in being able to gain international credits as a local assistant that definitely help shape people's perception, especially in the US, for experiences. And Ben Burt was cutting episode 2 and Roger Barton was cutting episode 3, and so to have the experience of working with those two editors was great. But I will also say they were only just for the shoot periods in Sydney, so I didn't follow those shows back to San Francisco, the ranch where post-production was. So they were, they were only short periods of time, three months maybe, recollection shoot periods. But yeah, they were, they were great. It answered the burning question of, yeah, but what's George like? So to be able to, stick my nose in other departments and wander around set and to see that was fantastic. And episode 2, I think, actually I might be saying something out of turn here.
Oh, that's okay.
I thought
everybody went to bed. Go ahead, say it.
I think episode 2, no, I might be wrong on this. I was going to say I thought episode 2 was the first film to shoot on HD cam, but maybe episode 1 was.
I think episode 1 did.
Okay, right. Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, the one nice thing was knowing that I was the first person in the world to watch rushes for the Star Wars films. So that was, I kind of got a kick out of that every day. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I lied. They're just the questions keep coming up. We can only do one more. So, how much do you find television? Christian asks, how much do you find television cutting techniques getting into feature methods and rhythms? Are the boundaries beginning to blur? Let me read it. Just one more question. How much do you find television cutting techniques getting into feature methods and rhythms? The boundaries beginning to blur. I'm not sure I quite understand that. Maybe you do, but there's certainly something to be said about the boundaries blurring between film and television. The type of work going on in television is definitely more cinematic than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Christian, I don't know. I don't think that there's any, I'm not aware of any delineation between the two. And I think that that's a credit to how cinematic and appealing, television, television, we say, I guess, streaming. There was a day where, Prisoner may not have had the cinematic qualities of whatever the summer film was, Hollywood film, but yeah, there is no difference now. I think any editor can cut any form of discipline. You just need the opportunity and that internal emotional intelligence sense of how are you servicing the story through the performances before you.
It's a terrific answer. And one quick aside, our mutual friend Sean says he loves your work. Good to see you. Assuming that's directed at you, not me. Thank you, Sean. Okay, well, before we bring things to a close, I just want to pass along that Andy Caney sends his regrets and apologies. The life of an editor, things do come up and schedules just go out the window. So unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight. I'll say this, and it's a shameless plug. If you would like to hear about Andy's experience working on The Invisible Man or want to know more about Jason's work on it, you can check out our podcast, The Rough Cut. Go to www.theroughcutpod.com, and there's podcasts for The Invisible Man, all kinds of movies, all kinds of TV shows. So check that out if you have time. Jason, thank you so much. I owe you at least a pint or two for doing this. Everyone at home, thank you for joining us. Big virtual round of applause for our special guest, Jason Ballantine. Before you log off, keep an eye out we have a special demo day coming up with our Avid video evangelist, Michael Krulik. He's going to show you everything you need to know about Media Composer, Mr. Ballantine's weapon of choice for all his movies. Thank you for joining us. Oh, look at this. Some information about the Australian Screen Editors and ASSG. And if you have any ideas or topics for future events, our dear friend Shauna Purcell would love to hear them because these events are for you, not me, for you. Again, as I mentioned, if you're interested in joining our student demo day, Intro to Avid Media Composer, keep an eye out for that in our thank you email. Thank you all, everyone, for joining us. I appreciate you sticking with us, and we'll see you again real soon.